The US is pulling out of a nuclear missile pact with Russia. The Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty has been in place for more than 30 years. President Trump accused Moscow of violating the deal.
Russia has violated the agreement. They've been violating it for many years, and I don't know why President Obama didn't negotiate or pull out. And we're not going to let them violate a nuclear agreement and go out and do weapons, and we're not allowed to. We're the ones that have stayed in the agreement, and we've honored the agreement, but Russia has not, unfortunately, honored the agreement. So we're going to terminate the agreement. We're going to pull out. Unless Russia comes to us and China comes to us and they all come to us and they say, let's really get smart and let's none of us develop those weapons. But if Russia's doing it and if China's doing it and we're adhering to the agreement, that's unacceptable. So we have a tremendous amount of money to play with on our militaries.
The treaty has been in force since 1987. Under the pact, Russia and the US required to eliminate nuclear missiles with a range of 1,000 to 5,500 kilometers. But the deal does not include sea-launched missiles. It was seen as a key milestone in ending the Cold War. Russia has repeatedly said it will keep observing the INF Treaty as long as the US does. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin said last year that if Washington were to renounce its obligations, Moscow would do the same.
If our American partners exit the agreement, we will give an immediate and reciprocal response. We have complied with the agreement, and we will continue to do so as long as our partners do the same.
We're joined now by Michael Malouf, former Pentagon security official. Thanks, Michael, for coming onto the programme. Now, the INF Treaty, it was an important step, wasn't it, in ending the Cold War arms race. And now, after more than 30 years, the US is pulling out. How significant is this?
Well, I think it's significant in that, for a number of reasons. Number one, it has held the peace, if you will, and particularly between Russia and the United States and Europe, in fact, for that length of time. I think that there's more ulterior motives attached to all this. If you listened closely, there has never been mentioned what the violations have been, alleged violations have been by Moscow. Number two, there's only been one meeting between the United States and Russia since for over a number of years, in fact, and never once has there been any talk of sitting down and discussing alleged violations and trying to recommit to adherence on both sides. But number three, there's something more significant to this. The United States, and Trump just raised that in his comments, the United States would rather pull out because of China. Right now, it cannot develop new intermediate-range missiles to confront China, even though China is not a signatory to that agreement. So this is adding a whole new ball of wax. And even though China was not a signatory to that agreement, the United States feels that it's now at a disadvantage in the development of intermediate-range missiles. And I would add one last caveat to all this. It was John Bolton, his national security advisor, who really pushed Trump to this decision. And Bolton has been in the forefront of getting the United States to act unilaterally, not only in this case, but also in dropping out of the Iranian nuclear agreement and putting troops into Syria toward the idea of regime change. So Bolton's a very dangerous fellow, and Trump is not really in charge of his own foreign policy.
I mean, if we look at the finger-pointing that's going on, Michael, Trump saying Russia's been violating the treaty, and Moscow has repeatedly accused the US of failing to meet its obligations. But do we know who is really to blame? And like you mentioned before, we don't know what those violations are meant to be, do we?
No, and if they were really serious about trying to correct a problem, if in fact there was one, they would have sat down and talked. But Bolton does not want to deal with Russia, even though he's going to be going to Moscow, I believe, next week, and he's going to inform Foreign Minister Lavrov that the U.S. is pulling out. Now, Is this a basis for them now to negotiate a better deal, as Trump always calls for? That's a possibility. But I think the overriding concern right now is China, and because China is not a signatory to that arrangement.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that, didn't we, in the clip of Donald Trump speaking, talking about that new deal that you've mentioned as well.
Yes.
How likely is it that that new deal will indeed be negotiated between Russia, between China, between the US?
Well, let's see what happens as a result of the meetings. I don't think it's a 6-month notice, so anything can happen. There's going to be a meeting of Trump with Putin at the G20 within the next month. That might be an opportunity for them to sit down and seriously discuss this thing and put off any precipitous action that he just announced today. Again, I think he's trying to leverage Russia, and we'll just see what happens. But there is 6 months. It has to be it is a 6-month notice, and if he lays it down formally if Bolton then lays that down formally when he goes to Moscow, that's when the clock begins.
As you've mentioned, Michael, pulling out of treaties seems to be an ongoing theme for Trump.
He feels that they're just not operating from a position of strength, and it's America first. All the usual rhetoric that you're hearing, and again, China is the key on this, and Bolton is of the mindset that we're at a disadvantage, and he's convinced Trump that we need to do something. And I might add that even Defense Secretary Mattis has expressed concerns about alleged violations. But again, nobody knows what those violations are. Is it the idea of developing a new cruise missile? Well, the treaty doesn't prohibit that. And the United States is developing new intermediate missiles and cruise missiles. But again, they can develop them, they can research, they just can't deploy.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Michael Malouf, former Pentagon security official, thanks very much for coming onto the programme.